Good evening. We'll open up the Kansas County 2024 Truth and Taxation meeting. And what we'll be doing tonight is Administrator Baker will be giving a fairly high-level overview of the proposed budget. So this 2025 budget was approved. It was a preliminary approval of the budget in the July or in August or September, so it's a few months ago. And we have till the end of the year to make a final approval at this meet, or when we do that, um, after we do the preliminary approval, about 3 quarters into the year, um, we can lower the taxes, but we can't raise it. So tonight we're hearing the overview, and then when Administrator Baker is done presenting that, we'll open up. We'll recess and then open up a public hearing and allow for the public to speak. And at that time, I'll give some instructions on what we ask of you at the time we have that public hearing. So for now, Administrator Baker.
Thank you. Kelsey Baker, Kansas County Administrator. I was just trying to figure out, fix this click share so you would be able to see my screen. The people in the audience would be able to see the presentation.
While she's doing that, I would say this, and I think everybody here knows this, and hopefully this is not the Board of Adjustment that we go attend in April, where we start out at our city or township. This is a different meeting for that. That will take place in April.
Okay, well, I'm going to get started so I don't take up any more time. We'll see if we can get it. My click share isn't working for some odd reason. It's worked every other time before tonight. I've never had an issue.
There it goes.
So included, I know, what's the chances? Yeah. Included in your board packet was the presentation for the budget truth and taxation meeting tonight. By statute, we are required to hold this public hearing for residents of Kansas County to voice their concerns regarding the proposed budget. As the chair stated, the board approved the preliminary levy back in September. And so tonight we will just be reviewing the proposed 2025 budget. The truth and taxation, this is the time, like I said, for public comment. We are not disputing valuation of property. We have our county assessor's office here tonight to answer any questions. And if you have any questions on estimated market value homestead, we have assessor staff and auditor staff here as well for you to ask questions to them. Moving forward, the 2025 budget summary. This slide was also with the preliminary budget as well. It kind of just goes over where's our county program aid, the 3.3 million, where's our gross levy coming in, where are all the funds being allocated to? General fund, solid waste, SCORE, road and bridge, family services. We have a building fund, county library fund, which we are required to have, health and human services, and then a capital equipment. And so we have a pie chart that divvies out where our dollars are being allocated towards. Like I said, the county board approved the preliminary levy at an 8.5%. Typically in the past, our levies have been below 5%. 2024, we had a 5%, and we're proposing a 2.5% for 2025. Some of the driving sources for the budget is payroll, benefits, one-time expenditures, which I'll be talking about the cell construction project out at the landfill. We have a positive thing with the increased levy, with the payroll increase that the board took action on in the health reset, resulted in more people being on our county health insurance plan. The sheriff said it tonight. We used to, on average, get less than 10 applicants. We're receiving 10 to 15 to sometimes 20 plus applications. That's really good. It's really good in today's world. The world has changed on how many applications. And so I've always said since I've started, I look at this job in two different facets. I look at it from a business side. I look at it from a government side. We have to take care of our employees. That's what private entities can do. But we also have to take care of our residents and our constituents within the county and meet their needs. But at the end of the day, we are government, we're public servants. We provide services that other entities can't provide. And so coming in at 8.5%, I get it. It's a high percent. It's a high levy. But we have had such a low levy for so many years, having this increase in all reality. If you look back from 2024 to 2017, we are just evening that. So the proposed levy, before I go into the 2025 proposed levy side, I'm going to ask Mark Thompson to come up. He's our county auditor, to come up and talk a little bit about how we come up with the levy.
So I'm just gonna try to keep this somewhat short. At the same time, by all means, if you have questions, throw them at me because I don't know what you're thinking. And again, when you talk taxes, you can talk and talk and talk.
You never get bored with it.
Oh, yeah.
Before you get into your presentation, state your name and
Oh, I'm
who
sorry.
you
Yeah.
are from.
Mark Thompson, County Auditor Treasurer. Does the overhead actually, is that on? So again, just stop me if I know, Kelsey, did you include this with their stuff? Okay. So hopefully you guys had a chance to read this, kind of a quick, 5-minute study of how taxes are calculated. And I'm just going to start talking about some of that.
You want the camera on now?
Yep, it's on. So to start out, this is just something I wrote down quick, like, I don't know, can you zoom in? If you can see it, I don't know if you can see it. Is that it? It's the max? Oh, perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so the county's gross net tax capacity comes out to 86,046,376. How do we get at that? Well, the assessors, they set the values of each property, and then based on the state's here we go. Based on the state's this is a classification rate table, and based on the class rate that the state determines, that is how you come up with tax capacity. So again, the value, you use the class rate that the state comes up with to get total gross net tax capacity. For instance, this probably helps the general public. This is my tax statement. Just to give you a real short value, $362,700 tax capacity. As you can see here, residential homestead, the first 500,000 is at 1%. 1% of 362.7 is 3627. Okay, that's just for my parcel. If you add all the parcels in the county, you come up with 86,046,376. Then we have TIF. We take off our TIF because we don't tax TIF property. We tax them, but we don't see that money. TIF money goes back to the TIF authority. So the net tax capacity is $85,254,7. And as Kelsey mentioned, we have a gross levy of $44,785, $113. You subtract out the county program aid, we get a net levy of $41,448, $434. Now you take that levy, the $41,448, $434, divide that by your net tax capacity, you get a county tax rate, 48.4862, which is 48.62%. So that's kind of how the rate's determined. Now that you can think about, this is just for the county, but you can think about this. This is how the city rate's determined. If you're in a city, it's the same way a township rate is determined if you're in a township. I'm going to get back to my tax statement again.
Can I ask you a question before we move
Yeah,
on? So the 85, what did we end up with?
85,254.
85,254. Was that based on what year?
This is for 2020. I'm sorry, this is for 2025. My tax statement was 24, but this is 2025.
So we already know in 2025 what our net tax capacity is.
Right.
When do we learn?
Don't hold me right to that 48.62 because I mentioned that you have to take out the TIF. There's power lines that have to come out of there. They're small numbers. So
And when do we actually learn that? Do we learn that the previous year, what that capacity will be? Because
well,
always construction going on. And
yeah, you have the assessors have to come up with the value again. And then based off the value of the parcels in the county that they determine, you take that by this year's state class rate. And that's how you get tax capacity. Then, again, you don't know the rate until you get a levy. You got to have a levy because you take the levy divided by the tax capacity to get a rate. So really, you can't come up with a rate until the first time that Kelsey comes to the board with her budget and levy information.
essentially, we're making estimates on the 2025 budget based on the 2024 net tax capacity, correct? Because we don't know what is being built yet in 2025, and
Right. You're right, but the assessors are
it's always that
a year
way. It's
behind.
always that
The assessors are a year behind.
Yep. Got
If you follow what I'm saying there, they've already set the 2025 values. They're actually working on 26 values right now. So,
And what I'm talking about, Mark, is mostly new
construction.
because somebody applies for a permit next week and they build a $2.5 billion home on Green Lake. That obviously Val could not account for that.
No, correct. That's going to be years down the road before that tax base is used. Yeah. I kind of forget where I was at here, but I think I was going to go back to my statement. Because I like to bring that up. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then maybe it's also Administrator Baker may be able to answer this. Our taxing capacity, what, 47, 48%? I can't see it again now. How does that
Tax rate
with other counties? Is there a general average?
I don't have the other counties, but
just generally speaking.
Yeah, I could get that for you, and if you wanted to compare it, I could do that. Again, you got to remember that every county is different based on size and all that and tax base. I do have a handout. I'm going to hand out here, and then I'll put it up on the screen. This is the tax rate of all the townships in the county, the cities in the county. Sometimes it's kind of nice to see how they have increased. So the 2024 final is in the black. 2025 T&T. This is the proposed rate based on the levy. Okay. And based on township levies and all that.
Okay, thank you.
So as I mentioned to the board members, and I'll say it now, this is a 2024 final tax capacity rate for the county, for the different taxing districts within the county, for the townships, and the cities, and then also for the schools that are down below here. So, for example, the total county rate in 24 was 46.218. This is your tax rate now. In 2025, the proposed is 48.812. See my writing there or not. You get down on the side over here, you can see, for instance, it starts out with Arctander, alphabetized. 2025, the 2024 rate was 10.989. Their tax capacity rate's going to 14.288. The cities are over on this side. For instance, like Wilmer, the 2024 rate was 54.412. 2025 is 57.553. And again, these are based on the T&T initial levies. They may, like you're here tonight, they could lower them yet, so then their rates would go down. But the cities could still lower them.
So what would cause, of course, our eyes go right to the jurisdiction we live in, right?
Yeah.
What would cause like New London Township to actually go down a little bit?
They could increase their tax base, new construction.
Oh, so that's a sign of growth.
Yep, it increases their tax capacity. Remember, it increases the value in the district. If the values increase, the tax capacity increases. And again, the way that you get your tax rate is you take your levy divided by your tax capacity. And as you can see, it actually went down, so it didn't go down. I mean, it didn't go down too much. So their levy maybe didn't go up that much, and maybe they had some growth. So moving on from there, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I guess the one thing I wanted to say was, so here, I get calls on, explain my taxes. How did you come up with my tax? So the public, what they get is they get a tax statement, okay? If you go to the website and look up your taxes on the website, you'll get a little bit different layout. Has all the same information as what's on your taxes. One thing that it shows that is not on the tax statement is your rate, okay? For instance, my rate is 85.084. That includes the county rate, the township rate, the school rate, all the taxing authorities in the county. So again, getting back to my estimated market is 362.7. My classification of my property again is residential homestead. The class rate is 1%. 1% of 362.7 is 3627. Okay. Now, if you look at your tax statement, if you look up on the top on the right side, there's your tax capacity, 3627. Now, 3627, you take that and you multiply it by the rate, 85.084, which I did below here. 85.85084 times the tax capacity of 3627. I get 3,086. That's the net tax capacity. You also have to add in the school referendum tax. In my case, it comes to 830. You add those two together, you get 391676, and that's what my tax is. So I don't know if you have any questions on that.
Where does the homestead credit come in?
The homestead credit
Valuation or in the
valuation comes off the estimated market value. So you take the estimated less your homestead exclusion, you get taxable market value.
So, and a second home in a business is always going to be at 1.5.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
A second home in a business is always going to be at 1.5 on that classification instead of 1%.
These rates, hard to memorize all these rates. This is kind of an assessor table that they go by, but you'd have to find your class, if it's commercial, if it's non-homestead or homestead, or if it's ag, as you go down. And this is from the Department of Revenue's website, so it's available to anybody. So they can find out, and of course, there's always thresholds, there's limits based on, there's tiers, I should say. For instance, in 24, payable in 24 ag homestead, the first 2.15, 2,150,000 is a 0.5% class rate. Over that becomes 1%. So your tax rate will double. Now that is in 2025, that's going to increase to 3,500,000. So that's going to give the farmers a lot of relief. Of course, now what we're talking about is a tax shift, okay? Because we still have to collect our levy dollars. But if a lot of their property is going to be at the 0.5% rate, somebody else is going to have to cover that. So again, this is on the Department of Revenue site. It's out there. You can see this, and this will help you understand how you come up with your tax rate.
Commissioner Bird.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple other questions about residential homestead. There's
Mhm.
2 tiers to that, it looks like.
Right, yep.
Then where is, what is the cutoff point? I think I know, but maybe you want to see if it's changed or not, to get homestead. And then what rate does it go to after you lose your homestead?
Okay, so residential homestead, the rate for the first 500,000 in value is at 1%. If you go over 500, your class rate's at 1.25. I think you got 2 questions in one there. I think you're talking homestead exclusion
Well, no, yeah,
also.
also because I just wanted to clarify. There's 2 classifications for homestead, and then there's also there's a point where you don't get any homestead, right?
Credit, yeah. Or you don't get any homestead exclusion. Well,
And what is that, or how's that?
again, the homestead exclusion comes off. Years ago, they had a homestead credit. They did away with that and gave you a homestead exclusion. 76,000 is where that starts, and that's going to change too. Anything below that, how can I say this? Anything below 76,000, you're exempt. I'm sorry, you get the full homestead exemption, I should say. As you go above 76, and I believe it's up to, that's changed. It used to be 400 and some thousand, 481. I think it's in the 500, low 5 now, low 500,000s. It zeroes out. You have no homestead exemption at that point. So you're paying tax on your market value, your full market value. So there's no benefit. You don't get no homestead credit, no homestead exclusion. Again, it used to be called homestead credit. Now it's a homestead exclusion. Over 500, I should have that number. I just don't have it. I think it's right on here. I think it's right on here that Kelsey handed out. I know it's on here. I saw it. 517,200 on the first page of this here handout.
So I don't know if you said it wrong, or if I heard it wrong. So in the case of the 517, so if that's the limit and your house is valued at 617, you would get the exclusion on the 517, but not anything over that. Is that correct?
You don't.
You don't even get it
phases
from
out.
at all.
Right, it phases out at 517. So
That's what.
So here's the max, and then as you keep your value keeps building, you get less and less homestead. Once you get to 517.2, you get 0 homestead exclusion.
Beyond the 517 or going all the way back to 0?
Beyond the 517,
Right.
it decelerates.
You still get it for
Phases out. You still get it below the 570. You don't get as much. Once you
that's-
get over 76,000, it starts to go down.
That's what I wanted to clarify. The other thing I think that's important here is all of these things that you're telling us, the classifications and the formulas and all of that, that's not an arbitrary decision made in your office, is it? Those are all set by statute,
Yeah, exactly.
just like
And
evaluation.
I mentioned that, yeah, exactly. They're all set by state statute. This comes right from the Department of Revenue, this class rate sheet. The classifications are all determined by the state. The tiers are determined by the state. The class rates, all this is determined by the state. We have no say in that.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, thank you for presenting tonight. You had mentioned when you talked about the ag property real briefly that the relief that they're getting results in a bit of a tax shift across other taxpayer classifications. In general, I seem to recall that over probably the last 20, 25 years, there's been more placed upon residential homeowners and less on, say, that ag or that commercial type property, where basically homeowners are picking up a little bit more of the tab. And primarily that is, as Commissioner Imdek said, set at the state level. That's something that those are policy decisions driven at the state level that are a big driver of increased uh, costs to our local residential taxpayers in general, correct?
That's correct. And to explain it to the public, if our levy did not increase at all, and if our values did not increase at all, some people would pay the tax shift, some people would pay more,
Mhm.
and some people would pay less. And there was no change in the levy or that's what you call a tax shift. It based on these thresholds,
Mhm.
um, and of course, based on property values. If they increase,
And because essentially counties are an administrative unit of the state,
exactly.
we have no say in that matter.
We have no
We
say
have
in,
to implement those policy decisions made at the state level. So
exactly.
that's one piece of how our taxes are figured out.
You have no control over his tax shift and all that stuff. The levy is what you control.
That's correct. Thank you.
Yep. I don't really have anything else. I'm probably taking up too much time already. Any
I
other
would
questions?
share one little piece of history that
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you know, is when I asked you the question about 1.5 on a second home in a business during the Jesse Ventura administration. Those of you who are old enough to remember, we all received a check for like $272. Nobody remembers what we did with that check. But all of a sudden they realized that, hell, we give away all that money, we have to make it up someplace. Well, I know what we'll do. We'll make your lake home at 1.5% and all businesses at 1.5%. And then we'll make up the money that went out to these $272 checks that went to everybody in the state of Minnesota.
So yeah, they maybe change the class rates. Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, like I said, I've taken up.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
All right.
If you ever have any questions, feel free to.
Kelsey, do you have any other closing comments before we open up the public hearing?
So if you go back to the presentation, you'll go over the proposed levy for 25. Mark kind of went over some of those numbers. So the board has until the end of December to approve the final levy for the 2025 budget. Tonight, I put in your board packet an 8.5% or a 7.6%. I did receive a question, so we're using the landfill reserves. We're using 3.645 million for a cell construction project and a purchase of equipment. And so that's offsetting. Why we have to still budget for it is to be transparent. We still have expenses that we need to account for. And so even though it's just getting pulled right away from our reserves and not really affecting the levy, it's to be transparent that this is what it costs to keep a landfill operating. And so it is very costly. It's 2.75 million to do the cell construction, and then the piece of equipment's 880,000. And this is part of our capital equipment purchase cycle. And so this was planned for 2025 budget. And so by putting that in there, we pull that from reserves so that doesn't really impact the overall levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like to add to it, I would really like to point out there's really good planning that we're doing this. It's good planning that we did have a landfill reserve that we can plan ahead when we need to add a new cell. So this is theoretically, if we didn't, we'd have to go to the levy. But throughout the years, we've been saving these dollars up to be able to plan ahead. So it does save on our levy. But that's another way of being transparent about it. Now I understand where you were coming from.
Yep. So we still have, like I said, we still have to budget. The 2023 audit showed that we have a little over 8.5 months of reserves. That increased from our final 2022 audit to our 2023. So we do have a robust, very healthy months of coverage as well. And so, like I said, the proposed levy is the 8.5%. I did put that option in there for the 7.6. That would be utilizing another $350,000 of reserves from our general fund balance as well. What I would be coming back to the board at the December 17th for final approval would be that 8.5%, unless I hear something different after the public comment section. Included in your board packet is just the wages. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I would like to note is for 2025, we're still in the contract cycle, so we would have a 3% for 2025 and 2026 for COLAs. At the end of 26, we would go into negotiations for a new 3-year cycle, hopefully 3 years. It's also negotiable. 2025 budget goals, we've started the space study to review those next steps, professional development for staff, best practices and efficiencies for delivering services to the public. I know each department has looked at, we are in environmental services, we're looking at an online permitting software through CPT, that it's at low cost. We're looking at some onboarding programs for our county employees. Currently, we send out a big old paper packet of benefits and health insurance, new hire information. We send that out by paper. Health and Human Services is looking at different ways on how we deliver our services, maybe more streamlined. Sometimes it doesn't cost any money. We're just changing the way our process is. And so we're continuing to look at that. One thing I wanted to note, the changes in interest rates. When we had 8.5 million, close to 8.5 million of ARP dollars, and we will be spending those down, that means we're not accruing as much interest. And so that will affect kind of the dollar amount that we're getting. We also have other areas of revenue, landfill, things like that, that we're making money. Not a lot, but we have money coming in. We have revenue coming in. The other thing is the board's decision, and that's something that I think we can continue working on as a pay philosophy. Not only do you look at a pay philosophy for class and comp studies, wages for employees, but you can also discuss a pay philosophy within the board on what they feel comfortable with in levies, so we don't hit this peak and valley, that we level that out and what the board will feel comfortable with. So I think that's something we need to continue the conversation around. But that's really helpful then to staff and the board on when you're approaching a budget cycle on where are you going to come in at. Not talking a biennium where you're going to do a 2-year budget cycle, but a conversation amongst the board where you have this philosophy where you would come in with a levy, the use of reserves and things like that. So just to end then the taxpayer information. So we do have a series of work sessions that we've had for the budget. For 2024, we've looked at 25, we've looked at 26 in these budget work sessions. We've implemented quarterly financial reports. We're going to improve on those going into 2025. We have the Board of Appeal and Equalization. That meeting is always held the second meeting in June. And then we have our budget meeting in September, that first meeting, and then the board approves the preliminary levy at the second meeting. And then we have the TNT. And so if you have, I will let the board now open that up to public comment, and I will stand by for any questions if you have any.
So we will adjourn the Truth and Taxation meeting and open up a public, or recess. I keep using that term interchangeably. We'll recess the Truth and Taxation meeting and open up a public for public comment. So I'll say the same thing I said earlier in the evening. If you have a comment that you wish to share with the board, please come up to the podium, state your name and your address. We ask that you speak for about, try to keep your thoughts down to around 3 minutes. And we're here to listen. We're not here to debate you. And so address the board. If you have a question of staff, do it through me, and then they'll come back up and answer, because people are recording and they'll want to hear the answers and see the response. So at this point, I'm going to invite anyone who wishes to speak publicly about the Truth and Taxation process to please come up to the podium and state your name and what you might wish to share with us. Greetings.
My name is Paul Chodek. I live at 21373 53rd Street Northwest up in Sunburg, Minnesota. And I thank you for the information. That is very informative, a lot of good questions. But I just wanted to find out and get it clarified for, if you could dumb it down for me. So there's an 8% increase proposed for next year. And just where is that coming from? What can the major silos, I guess, where the increase is coming from? Thank you.
So okay, what did I just say? So that's a question of staff, so I would invite Administrator Baker to come up and respond to that. But by and large, it had to do with the wage and benefits package and the negotiations with labor within the past 18 months.
And just to add on that, typically, any county budget is really driven by payroll and benefits. That's the majority of where we're at, and I think I'm sorry, I couldn't get this up on the screen. But our overall wages that we have budgeted for 2025 is full-time employees is 36.7 million. We have roughly around 440 employees, 15 departments. We budget for part-time wages because if somebody resigns, you're gonna have staff specifically, like in our law enforcement, our deputies, public safety, we want to make sure we're ensuring public safety, and so you'll have staff working overtime. With that comes contract language, might be time and a half, different things like that. So we budget for part-time and overtime. And then when you add in the FICA and para, our total overall 2025 payroll whole entire budget is 43.6 million. So half of our budget really, just like the chair said, really goes to payroll and benefits. This really doesn't go into the details of all the benefits. That's also added on. When you look at somebody's salary is 85,000, loaded labor law, typically for us is around 20 to 25,000 for benefits. That's typical in today's world with county government. 25,000 is going to be added on for benefits, whether they pick single or family, whether it's great insurance or not. That's typically what the loaded labor law is going to be.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's taken me a long time to learn this, and so I like to share my knowledge of what little bit I learned. So our total budget will be somewhere in the 80 to $90 million range, but the levy itself is roughly half of that. 99% of what we levy goes to wages. So the rest of it is dollars that come in from the federal government to build a road, to build a bridge, to pay for veteran services, to pay for social services. We just handle the money, we apply it, and so it's for staff and the building to house that staff, and it's basically what the levy portion of it is for.
So about 36 million was the payroll and benefits out of about the 44 gross million. So lion's share of that.
Yes, yes. Anybody else wish, Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think of special note here is that because of the type of work that a large share of our workforce does, many of those folks hold bachelor's, master's, even doctorate degrees. And so that is an indirect wage driver as well, because we're asking a lot of these professionals, especially in law enforcement, health and human services, other uh, departments, and so it's a little different than just general workforce where not everybody has a degree, and certainly we have folks that fall in all of those different categories, but we're relatively heavy on the degreed professionals that we depend upon to deliver those types of services.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to come up and speak regarding truth and taxation? If not, I will close the public hearing portion of this meeting and reconvene as the Kennewick County Truth and Taxation Board. Is there anything else? We're not going to make a decision tonight. We're not going to approve this one or the other. Is there any closing comments before we adjourn this meeting?
Like I stated before, my recommendation will be to bring the 8.5% levy to the board at the December 17th for final approval. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns. I can always have a second option in my back pocket, that 7.6 if needed come December 17th.
Commissioner Bird.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really like to comment. It's so unfortunate. This a very nice graphs, the report, and we couldn't show it on
It has
YouTube.
worked every other
So
time.
anybody who's watching, I encourage them to go into the county website and uh, draw this up there. It's there for your information. It really shows our tax history, levy, and so forth, and how it's broken down. So it's too bad that you couldn't have that, because sometimes the pictures as good as the words.
I can
They
make
go together so good.
And
Yeah.
it's a slide deck, so I suppose you could email it to someone if they requested it.
And if I may, too, part of this is that, looking at the levy, we've been keeping it extremely low, extremely low. Good job, but sooner or later things have to come up, and with COVID and everything happening, and just kind of restating what you just already stated, that we're starting to catch up a little bit, and unfortunately, it would have been nicer if we kept raising a little bit each year, but I think it'd be a good move to stick with that 8.5%, and not knowing what's going to happen to after the first of the year, unfunded mandates we get. But I don't think we should just save it back for that. But I think we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you, Commissioner Bird. If there is nothing else to come before the board, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you guys for coming in.
Yeah. Thanks. Sure, free to cut, sir. Oh.